At what point, Rodney, did you realize that oncology was your calling and that this was an area that was just calling you?
My mother was impacted with breast cancer about 15 years or so ago, and good news is she caught it early and she's a survivor.
How we move from these targeted therapies and like radiopharmaceuticals are a white hot space right now.
It's a targeted therapy where it consists of two primary, just to make it really simple, two primary components. It's a targeting compound or ligand and a radioisotope carrying a small amount, a micro amount of radiation.
When you think about all of the patients that are potentially eligible for Novartis oncology products in terms of that commitment to patients,
I feel a tremendous responsibility to patients. We could treat up to 75,000 patients a year, but I try to think about it in one patient at a time.
if you look ahead 5 years, what kind of impact do you hope Novartis Oncology will have made in the lives of patients?
5 years from now, I hope your zip code doesn't make a difference in terms of how long you live with cancer.
Rodney, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to see you again. How are things going?
Hey, Chris, it's great to see you again as well, and things are going great. It's besides being a little bit cold out here on the East Coast, everything's going extremely well.
Yeah, I know. Quite a bit of snow and cold this winter, getting a real winter out there in the Northeast. And in fact, it's interesting. I mean, you grew up in Philadelphia, right?
No, actually, I grew up in New Jersey. I spent so much time in Philadelphia. It's funny, my wife and I joke a little bit because when people say, "Where are you from?" I always say Philly, but I actually grew up in Inglewood, New Jersey, North Jersey.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in. I'd love to learn more about your background. I mean, I know that your Novartis is really clicking in all cylinders here. I'm eager to get into your role and your portfolio. Maybe let's start there for our listeners, Rodney. Tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at Novartis.
Sure. I'm currently the Senior VP TA head for our oncology franchise. So that entails our hematology business as well as our solid tumors. So, particularly around prostate cancer, breast cancer, CML. Also, lead up our radioligand therapy, which is a new innovative therapy as well. We can talk a little bit more about that. But I have a chance to work both on our U.S. commercial business, and then also work globally with my international team and development team and R&D team in terms of the future of oncology with Novartis as well.
That's great. And we're going to dive into all of that. I think let's go ahead and start back at the very beginning and take a look back at your early career and years in the industry. What experiences most shaped you in terms of the leader that you are today?
I think a little bit of it goes back to what I was saying. I grew up in Inglewood, New Jersey, and I think, growing up, it's a special town. Growing up there, very diverse city, very close-knit city. I think what I learned there was how you work closely with people from different backgrounds and different experiences, socioeconomic, different ethnic backgrounds as well. And I think that shaped me in terms of, I always call it my love for people of all backgrounds, and how do you get along and how do you find commonality. So it shaped me quite a bit there. And then I think it also showed me how, hard work really pays off. Good work ethic, doing the right thing, trying to live right, which is, I think, flows right into leadership for me, and how you show up every day at work, doing the right thing for people. But the business that I'm in, I also think about doing the right thing for patients as well.
Did you ever imagine yourself working in healthcare, or what did you think you'd be doing when you were younger?
I can't say that I imagine myself in healthcare in particular, although as I look back to Inglewood, I actually worked in a pharmacy for a few years, sort of stocking shelves. And so I was around, healthcare, but I never imagined this would be my career in terms of where I went. But when I think about alignment on my values and healthcare, it's such a great connection because, healthcare is all about helping people to live better quality of life, helping people to sort of move forward. And I think that's really what I'm about, whether it's mentoring people or doing whatever can be done to help people have a better experience. And I even think about where at Novartis in areas like CML, chronic myeloid leukemia, that was once a deadly disease and now it's a chronic condition. And being able to be in a space where, you can move the needle and really help people, it's personal and it really connects.
Who were those people early in your life, Rodney, that maybe they were family members or a teacher that helped you believe that bigger opportunities were possible for you?
I think it started, Chris, with my parents in terms of just my parents always used to preach about, just doing the right thing. So really strong values and making sure, treating everybody exactly, the same, and then always being the best at what you do. And I think that is instilled in me and working hard. I also think about a couple of teachers in my life. I was thinking about Miss Ryland, who really advocated for me early on, as I was going through the educational system and, in elementary school, and really speaking up for me. And, at that time, I didn't realize what that meant, but it really showed and shaped me in terms of, what happens when people stand up for you, because she stood up for me, which then helped me to sort of advance in my studies. And I think that played a big role. And, having someone that really believes in you, really helped me to understand that belief can bring strength to your own journey. And I think it's really helped me out a lot.
Rodney, I'm often asked by others. In fact, I just had a mentorship call earlier this week from a fellow, from an alumnus from my college, and I'm often asked, how do you break into pharmaceuticals? How do you get in and then kind of move up? What did that journey look like for you, and what were the hardest barriers for you to overcome?
Breaking into pharma was, I won't say it was easy, but it can be really difficult. I was lucky. I went to a good school. I went to Drexel University. I had a chance to do co-ops. That was one of the things that attracted me to Drexel. So I understood a lot around corporate America and how that operates through those co-ops. So when it became time for me to get a job right out of college, the other thing, it teaches you how to interview. So I had really good interviewing skills. And I was fortunate. I always use this story growing up in New Jersey. I call it Farmer Row, right? I used to go down Route 1 in New Jersey. I still can see it in the Johnson and Johnson, sort of manufacturing plant on the side of the road. You see and I always said I wanted to work for Johnson and Johnson one day. I was like, I want to work at that company. And I was fortunate they came to Drexel, did some recruiting, and I was able to land a job with J&J, and it was actually my first job out of school. So I got in really early into the pharma business. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time, of course. I look back on it now, I recognize how blessed and how lucky I am to be in this space. But it was amazing how just to earlier in the conversation, that alignment with the, sort of the mission and the vision of J&J, the credo that everybody knows about, aligns so well with my own personal, values. And then staying in, though, that's the key, right? I always say to people that I mentor today, it's one thing to get in the door, it's another to stay. And it's the hard work and it's putting in the extra effort. It's the connections as well, right? That work so well in terms of how do you continue to sustain your career and build it and to have a plan. And there was a gentleman at J&J who really shaped my path, Ed Hill. And I want to say this was literally probably my first or second year with J&J. And he said, hey, let's put on paper, what do you want to do with your career? What do you want to do with your life? And of course, I said, hey, I want to run a company one. I want to run J&J one day, of course, right? I was just energetic, ambitious. And he said, that's great. He said, but let's balance. What about your family? Like, how does that all come together? Because, it's not just going to be you as you grow up. I didn't have a family at the time, but you have to balance, how does family fit into that? How does additional education fit into that? Those different sort of variables that you can't predict. And it at least gave me a blueprint for what I wanted to do with my life and my career within the pharma industry.
So, at what point, Rodney, did you realize that oncology was your calling and that this was an area that was just calling you?
I've actually, there wasn't a one specific moment that I can name, but I will say that I've been in and out of oncology for about 25 years. I've been in more than I've been out, but I've tried to work in other disease areas, respiratory and diabetes and cardiometabolic areas. But my mother was impacted with breast cancer about 15 years or so ago. And good news is she caught it early and she's a survivor. And of course, that gave me a little bit more vision on how cancer can impact a family and impact an individual. And of course, it was very personal to me. And then just a few years ago, I lost my brother to a rare cancer. He was impacted, and that obviously had a big impact on me. And the thing about my brother versus my mother is my brother found his cancer, it was stage 4. My mother identified her cancer early, stage 1. And one survived, one didn't. And so it just says like early detection is so important, right? And that's a big piece that I'm committed to, is helping to improve early detection and allowing people to obviously live a good quality of life. When you find it early, there's a higher likelihood that you'll survive longer as well.
Well, that's right. I was going to ask you about that because now I'm understanding more about your commitment to patient advocacy because I know that Novartis, invests in community education and awareness around detection. I mean, for prostate cancer, I've seen ads, I think, in partnership with the NFL on TV, that Novartis is a part of. So tell us more about the importance of that and why that's, I mean, for you personally, but for Novartis, right? I mean, sort of raising that awareness amongst patients around early detection is important, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the most important pieces of how do you engage a community, right? And come up with some bold approaches to connecting with them so they can actually act. Because there's one thing to talk, is another thing to act. And I'm all about action. And we have a number of initiatives that Novartis has put in place that I'm very proud of. One of them is Blitz the Barriers. We're the lead founding partner for Blitz the Barriers. It's an initiative that, we work with zero prostate cancer. We've committed to over $7.5 million over 3 years to sort of kickstart this initiative. And we have a goal of trying to serve over a 500,000 people in this initiative. And we're also, you mentioned it, we're the first corporate partner for the NFL. Sports connect closely with the community. We all sort of understand our own local team. And I do think education is local. The more local you can be, the more you're able to mobilize communities and get them to do something. So you have to connect. And it's funny, coming up on the Super Bowl in last year in 2025, we kicked off the Your Attention Please, which was a breast cancer awareness campaign, right? And that was targeted to women above 40. And then another one, because you can have all these initiatives, but sometimes you need some policy things to go into place. And we also have this Alliance for Breast Cancer policy that will help to improve patients' diagnosis and patients' testing to make sure these type of tests are actually being paid for as well, because sometimes cost gets in the way of someone taking that next step. So we work with a number of advocacy partners to sort of educate specifically in multiple areas: prostate cancer, breast cancer, that have a big impact on people's lives. And it goes back to what I started at. If you can detect it early, you're going to have a better chance of surviving longer as well.
So, Rodney, you were a part, you had mentioned earlier, I think briefly, you mentioned kind of your work in CML, a form of leukemia. And this was like really important work because it signaled the beginning of a new era of targeted medicines and personalized medicines, didn't it? Tell us a little bit about that earlier work that you did in CML. And when I suppose that's right, when you sort of entered oncology at that time?
Yes, exactly. I wasn't with Novartis at the time, but it was probably 25 years ago where Novartis discovered, introduced to the market Gleevec for CML. And this was a deadly disease at that time. And it's now a chronic disease. Patients are living with CML, living a long time. But targeted therapy, it makes me think about other advanced medicines that we're working in, and in particular, like radioligand therapy, which is another area, which is a very targeted area for prostate cancer in particular. And it's an advanced one where it's an opportunity, again, for patients who have metastatic prostate cancer to potentially live a better quality of life, and live a little bit longer at that stage. Prostate cancer, 1 in 8 patients will be men, I should say, will have prostate cancer. And surviving this deadly cancer takes a lot of intervention. And so, radioligand therapy is a little bit more of a targeted therapy that will help patients as well.
Maybe share, if you wouldn't mind, for the audience, sort of give them an understanding of sort of how we've moved from these targeted therapies, and like radiopharmaceuticals are a white hot space right now, as you've outlined. And then, but Novartis is in a unique position because you have like all of the modalities of advanced therapies. You also have gene therapies and even some cell therapies, right?
Exactly. We have gene therapy, we have cell therapy and CAR T, and we're really proud of the innovation that comes out in Novartis, really advancing medicine and helping patients and reimagining medicine the way patients can live. Chris, I was thinking a little bit more because sometimes when I talk about things like radioligand therapy, people are wondering like, what is that? And
Yeah.
it's a targeted therapy where it consists of two primary, just to make it really simple, two primary components. It's a targeting compound, or ligand, sometimes it's called, and a radioisotope carrying a small amount, a micro amount of radiation. And basically, the ligand binds to biomarkers, right, directing the isotope to cancer cells within the body that have spread within the body, and it allows it to basically to destroy those cells. And unlike maybe radiation, a lot of people think about that's spread a lot further. Maybe it kills good cells and bad cells. You know, radioligand therapy (RLT) tries to be more specific and more targeted, so you kill less good cells and more of the bad cells at the end of the day.
Rodney, when you think about all of the patients that are potentially eligible for Novartis oncology products across solid tumors and blood cancers, radioligand therapies, cell and gene, what responsibility does that place on you as a leader to feel, in terms of that commitment to patients?
I feel a tremendous responsibility to patients. Whether it's in breast cancer patients or prostate cancer patients, but I think about them, Chris, sort of one patient at a time. It's a large number of patients, of course, and we could treat up to 75,000 patients a year, but I try to think about it in one patient at a time. And I go out, I talk to providers, I get a chance to talk to patients as well, and just to keep it personal. Because one, I'll give you a great, it's not a great experience, but an experience where I was talking about my brother. When people hear that they have cancer, it's devastating. And I do remember when my brother he was identified with sort of a lump, a tumor on his thyroid. They weren't sure if it was cancerous or benign, but sort of talked him into going to make sure he goes and get it checked out. And when he was going to meet with the doctor, I said, I was out of town, but I said, hey, dial me in. I want to be there. I want to help because being educated in this area, maybe I can, just in case it was cancerous. And when I listened to the doctor, and the doctor say, hey, unfortunately, I'd like to tell you that, and it's malignant. It's thyroid cancer, and unfortunately, it's stage 4, right? It's undifferentiated thyroid cancer, which I already knew what that meant. My brother didn't quite know what that meant, but I give him a lot of credit. He was a strong man. He was still smiling. They say, "Okay, doc, thank you very much." And in the meantime, I'm putting myself on mute because I'm sobbing. Right, I'm just like understanding what that meant. And so I take that with me, right? And that's what I mean by one patient at a time. When patients, I know what patients are dealing with when they hear it because I've heard it. It didn't have happen to me specifically, but it happened to me through my family. And yeah, so it's personal.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that story. And I'm sorry about what you and your family went through with your brother. I mean, that's, I think, part of the hope of the work that you're doing at Novartis, and maybe asking you, Rodney, to look ahead. Let's look. I hate to ask the question 5 years because you would love to make bigger impacts sooner than that. But let's just say if you look ahead 5 years, what kind of impact do you hope Novartis Oncology will have made in the lives of patients?
I hope that we would help to redefine what cancer care means to patients. I mean, if we do our jobs right, if we all do what's possible, you think about modalities like radioligand therapy becoming more of a main pillar of oncology in the future, being available widely instead of only in small group. In prostate cancer, maybe it's available in other areas as well, which can bring, you think about, I always think about the next generation of patients as well who are more educated, so when you're more educated and expecting more, and you have the You have AI, and so patients now understand a little bit more about the disease, and they're being very, I would say, demanding in terms of making sure that no matter where you live, you can get access to medicines no matter what, right? And I think that's an important part of being local, going into the communities. 5 years from now, I hope your zip code doesn't make a difference in terms of how long you live with cancer. So whether you live in obviously the big cities or you live in a rural area, you have access to the most important medicines that are out there. And I think that's the work that I'm really committed to, and my peers and my colleagues are committed to doing that work and making sure everybody has that. Because I think access at the end of the day, Chris, is critical. We think about affordability sometimes. Can people pay for it? But some people never even have a chance to try to pay for it because they don't even have access to the drug in their communities. And because of that, they live a shorter, despite their span of life is shorter than someone living in I would say a more affluent community. So let's get rid of that. Hopefully in 5 to 10 years, that's no longer an issue.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Rodney. And I know that you're passionate about it. In fact, I know that that you've actually worked in outside the U.S. where access is a big issue in many parts of the world. It's a shame that we have to talk about access issues even in the U.S. But you've worked in Europe, you've worked in South Africa. I mean, what did you learn from those experiences, and how did that shape how you think about access and health equity?
Yeah, I smile when you say those because those were great experiences working in outside the U.S. And I learned a lot. One about cultures, right, and how to connect with cultures because they're different. Being in the UK in London versus being in Johannesburg versus being in Philadelphia or New Jersey. I learned a lot about how to connect with people, but I also learned a lot about how do you get patients access to what's important to them. And I remember specifically around South Africa, when I first arrived at South Africa, a colleague of mine said to me, Rodney, just remember, this isn't about what you get from Africa, it's what you give to Africa. And I always kept that in mind in everything that I did. And in Africa, a lot of times branded medications are not as available and accessible as generic medications are. And so, it taught me a lot in terms of being innovative. How do you get more of the, I would call branded drugs that are more advanced to patients everywhere? And I always say if I could do it in South Africa, which is a great community, but has a lot of challenges from a economic perspective, I can do it in the U.S. Right? And so I bring those learnings from there, and I bring those learnings from the UK, where a different system, right? More of a social system where it's their healthcare ecosystem is very different than ours, and you learn innovation there too. It's finding ways to bring these medicines like radioligand therapy, like you know CAR T gene therapy to patients where they belong, right? Where they exist and where they are.
That's a great message. I think maybe just as we look to wrap up today, Rodney, and we can talk to you for hours, but I think that I'm looking for young people growing up today, and maybe especially those who might not see themselves represented in leadership positions in the pharmaceutical industry. What advice would you give to them about, believing in what's possible?
Chris, I will say, tell them believe what's possible is possible, right? It's possible. I was at JP Morgan not too long ago, and I had someone come up to me, Julian, who I hadn't seen probably in 20 years or so. And when I first met him, he was a recent college grad, so he was growing up. And he said something to me that just really hit me. He said, Rodney, what you don't know is, when I saw you in a leadership position, it gave me hope and showed me what's possible. And so I say that because I think sometimes people have to see people that look just like them to believe that they can. And that's the example that I try to bring. I do a lot of mentoring today. I work in nonprofit organizations and mostly work with young people is what my passion is. And it's just about showing them what's possible. So I can tell them a lot, but I also like to show them. Some of it is by just being the example, but some of it is by helping them to sort of navigate because it can be, pharmaceutical industry. even other industries, it can be complex, it can be challenging, but it's doable. And I think I'm a living example of how well you can do when you really sort of focus and you have people in your life that help to pull you up and help to sort of get you to the next stage. I didn't have, I'll go back to, my uncle was the first person that I remember going to college, my Uncle Tyrone, and he was the example for me. He showed me that it was possible, and thank goodness I had him. So I think sometimes people just need to see it to believe it.
I mean, thanks for all that you do to mentor and give back to the community, for your focus on the patients and advocacy. And it's been a pleasure hearing your story today. And I want to thank you for being open and transparent on your journey and sharing with us here today. It was awesome getting to know you better, Rodney.
Same here, Chris. Thanks for the time. Thanks for bringing me on your show. As I said, I listen to your podcast all the time. So it's an honor to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for listening. Have a good day.
You're welcome. You too.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow RX for Biotech on your favorite podcasting streaming platform and subscribe on our YouTube channel to listen to more episodes just like this. And finally, if you or someone you know has just received a difficult diagnosis, especially a cancer diagnosis, we know that it can be overwhelming. And you hear the words, you hear the diagnosis, but you're left with lots of questions. Well, therapyforme.ai helps you do the journey, helps you take that next step. It helps empower you with the right information to know what questions to ask your providers to help you find a specialist near you that can help. There's no long waits, no guesswork, just clearer answers and a path forward. If you're looking for care, alternative treatment options, or just to find a specialist, or just need to be connected to a nurse navigator who can help answer some of your questions, start at therapyforme.ai. Thanks for listening.